Ernesto Spruyt, thank you so much for being on the African Tech Roundup. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Now, Ernesto, you wear several hats. The most interesting one for me at this point would be that of founder of Tunga, which is a work intermediary platform that connects tech businesses to African coders. But you're also something called a chief mentor at one of Holland's largest media companies, TMG. Tell me about how the one role led to you founding Tunga.
Well, actually, I was first founder of Tunga and then I came into that role at TMG. And they both stem from the same source because before this I had a startup company called Mobber and we were part of the Yes Delft, which is a large tech incubator here in the Netherlands. And what I did there is apart from working with corporates, I did a lot of mentoring of other startups. So kind of working on my own startup and helping other startups went hand in hand. Mobber didn't quite make it as a startup, but as an entrepreneur there, I experienced the problem finding good software developers at the moment that I needed them. So that's when I decided to start Tunga. And slightly later, but more or less at the same time, one of my corporate pilot partners heard that I was stopping with Mobber and they invited me to come over to TMG and work with the internal startups slash digital companies that they have there in their portfolio.
Oh, I see. So they have an internal sort of incubation slash acceleration program at the company.
Yes.
And you share all your knowledge and experience with them.
Yes, I guide basically the companies through a 100-day program, try to provide them with all the necessary resources that they need, give them feedback where necessary, and also work with entrepreneurs more on a personal level.
And does that put you under pressure to make sure your startup works?
As far as I need that pressure, no, it doesn't really. No, it's separate tracks that I'm doing it. I'm always trying. I always feel the pressure, let's say, from within, because in the core, I'm always have been an entrepreneur, always will be. So don't need that outside motivation.
Well, yeah, certainly. From doing some research, I found out that you actually started out in hospitality management.
That's true. Yeah.
So what was the bridge between what you went to university to study and what I imagine you must have had a passion for, and you ending up in tech and innovation? What was the bridge for you?
Well, looking back, it's always logical, but it's not that I took the decisions in my career from a very rational point of view. I chose for hospitality management because I was very young and I had a gut feeling that I liked this world where it was all about making other people happy. And in the end, that never went away, but the form in which I want to do it became very different. Because I'm always interested to go into new unexplored paths, and that is not something that is, let's say, common for a regular hospitality professional, but it is common for somebody interested in innovation and new business. So after the hospitality management bachelor, I did a master's in business. And then I ended up in Kazakhstan, of all places.
Where's that? Eastern Europe or
It's
Asia?
It's Central Asia, former Soviet
Central
Union.
Asia. Yeah.
And 1 year of Kazakhstan and then six years of Moscow, where I built my own consultancy, helping Dutch companies enter the markets of the former Soviet Union. So this was really, let's say, in a time that Russian market was developing very quickly, and the Dutch companies needed a bridgehead there, and I was forming that bridgehead. It was very dynamic period. I enjoyed it really, really much, and it also demanded a lot in terms of being able to improvise and to operate in an uncertain environment, which is basically my hobby and my profession.
That's interesting. Now, I'll have some more questions about your experiences around around all those things, because that sounds fascinating. But let's talk about Tunga a little bit. I mean, it's no secret that the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation have put a lot of hope and indeed a lot of money in a Nigerian startup called Andela, which in my mind shares some similarities with your business, Tunga. Tell me a little bit about what your hopes for Tunga are, what your aspirations are, and what you make of the trend towards I suppose it's e-learning, but also harnessing the skills of coders on the continent, specific to Africa.
Okay, so first of all, I about Andela, I think it's a great initiative, and we have been in contact with them, and we definitely play into the same trend and have similar missions, if you will. But our approach with Tunga is very different. So I rather, from a market perspective, I rather see it as complementary than as competitive.
Right.
Tunga.
So perhaps for the benefit of our listeners who might not be familiar with either business, please give me a sense of what it is Tunga does and how you go about doing it, and perhaps how different it is to what Andela does.
Okay, so to understand Tunga, I'll go back to when I had my previous company, which was also a software-based company. And you have to imagine that in the Netherlands and in Europe, where we are based, there is, according to the EU, there's a shortage of around 1 million ICT workers, right? So for a small company to have, let's say, flexible access to a software development at affordable prices, it's rather impossible. It was always a hassle to work with freelancers for us. Not that in the end, we couldn't find them, but we could never mobilize them on the moment that we needed them, and they are generally very expensive. So my first goal was to solve that. And the way I wanted to solve that was to circumvent all the problems that we experienced with traditional freelancer marketplaces. Which are mostly one-off transactions every time you begin anew to search for talent that you need. The idea behind Tunga was to enable companies to find good developers and get connected to them before the moment they actually need them, so that you can build like a social network. And when your network is robust enough and you need somebody, then the chance that somebody is available at the moment that you actually need them is much bigger. That was the idea. And me having a background in development aid and working in Africa, because after my Russian period, I was with an NGO for 2.5 years. I thought that it would be really great if we could find those developers in Africa.
And why Africa as opposed to, I don't know, there's certain places we typically think about when we think of a surplus supply of coding talent. I think of places like Russia, where you spend a lot of time, and Ukraine, and certainly places like China. What would make Africa specifically an area or a region you'd concentrate on specifically?
Okay, well, first of all, it was not knowledge based. It was intention based, and I'm a shared value adept, so I always try to combine, let's say, what I call a business sense with social impact, if you will.
Right.
And
social capitalism.
Yeah, so you could call it like that. So I've been involved in, after my Russian period, in many social enterprises in the Netherlands. So it's just a second nature to think about, okay, if I'm going to do something, I want to try to do it with, it always has to make business sense, but I want to try to do it with as much societal value as possible.
Right.
So that's when I had a hunch, okay, it would be great if we could find those developers in Africa. But at that moment, I didn't have a clue whether there was a big enough community of developers at all in Africa. And I just went doing some research, and I was positively surprised about developments. I found out that Africa in many fields kind of is ahead in terms of innovation, because you're just skipping generations of technology that the West has been using. And also
true innovation as opposed to innovation for the sake of catching Pokemon.
And absolutely true. And I came in contact with a Dutch design studio called Butterfly Works, and they had been involved in an organization called the BITS Academy, which is a curriculum for digital design, and which had been rolled out through several IT schools, if you will, throughout Africa under the BITS label. So you have the oldest one is NairoBits in Kenya. But I think that there were at that time 7 schools in 6 countries in East Africa predominantly. And they had an alumni community of around 7,000 alumni. Not all software developers, but let's say a substantial part of that, software developers. So that kind of answered my question of whether there are enough developers on the continent. Yes, there definitely are. And for them, it was really interesting because since they were involved in education, okay, if you educate people, it's also nice if you can provide them with well-paying work after that. And that's when we decided to team up. So Tunga is basically a joint venture between myself and the Butterfly Works, and try to see if we can make it work. And that started something like a year ago. And the first thing that we want to try to validate is, okay, can we get enough good developers out of the market? Can they perform, let's say, on the level that our clients that we could find here require? And we did some pilot.
And how did you go about verifying that?
Okay, I just sent a guy to Kampala. And of course, we leveraged the network, the BITS Academy network that we had, but we also went a little bit outside of that. And my colleague Bart, he was there for like half a year, the second half of 2015, and was very successful in finding good developers, coordinating pilots with clients, which went all very well. So that was a reason for us to be able to get funding from several philanthropic foundations here in the Netherlands. And we started building the platform in December, January. And since then we have run 3 iterations on the platform. So we just released the third one, which is basically a beta version, but which works quite well, I might say. And in the meanwhile have been steadily building the business with clients. So that's where we came from.
So building the pipeline to basically channel the skills that you've tapped, that you've found.
Yeah.
And so from the sounds of it, I'm already seeing some differences. And I keep bringing up Andela just because it's a high profile example in your space. But to my mind, Andela seems to be in part, or a big component of their process involves an induction process that prepares coders, hopefully in their case, a highly screened, super talented kids mostly, who by the end of 2 years are prepared to sort of deliver at a certain level. You're looking for people who are ready now, from what I can tell.
Yes. In principle, we are looking for people who have already had the part of the education and who have some practical experience. I think another big difference is that Andela is really aiming for a high end, the top end, if you will.
Yes.
And keeping a lot of factors under their own control. So both the screening and the let's say the grooming and the managing of the process. Our longer term goal is to have a self-organizing platform. Of course, at this moment that's not realistic. So we do a lot of onboarding, both of coders and of clients. But
I can imagine an environment that might be similar. Correct me if I'm wrong. That might be similar to how a platform like Fiverr works, where
yeah,
you rely on the community within Fiverr to determine who
yes,
deserves a 5-star rating,
yes,
and basically the best talent will gravitate to the most discerning clients organically, that kind of thing.
yes, that's true. Of course, you need flying hours into the platform to be able to do that. So that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to build. We do have, let's say, admission standards for people.
Like a secret password or something.
No, standards like,
No, I know, I'm being silly.
nah. But if you compare, let's say, Fiverr and Andela, they're both at two ends of the spectrum, right? So you have one top
Yes,
end,
yes,
which is more catering for large corporations with big budgets. And the
right.
other one is low bottom end, which are mostly one-off transactions with very low budgets, etc. We more are aiming for, let's say, the middle market.
Right.
Um,
So, which leads to my next question. What's your business development cycle like in as far as finding the clients who would then tap the talent you've sourced on your platform?
At this moment, it's mainly direct sales.
Okay.
We are working with, let's say, medium-sized companies mostly, who have a significant budget for software development, often have some experience with software outsourcing, and who are interested in a flexible layer around their core team, and want to build longer term relationships with freelancers that are available flexibly.
Right. And so the coders listening to our conversation right now, who might be interested in signing up with you guys, what's the process around that?
The process is, well, in theory, you can go to the platform, create an account, and start making connections with developers and start posting tasks. In practice, we see a lot of people just approaching us, sending us an email. Then we get into contact. We try to understand their needs, and we try to onboard them, help them as much as possible with onboarding them, get the right coders for them, help them setting out their first tasks, etc. So it's
And so also in recent weeks, Naspers, Africa's largest tech firm, sunk a significant amount of money into Code Academy.
yeah.
What do you make of this trend towards the e-learning trend online? Is it helpful in creating the pipeline of talent that you're hoping to get onto your platform?
Now, it's definitely helpful, and of course, this is all a result of the global shortage of good software developers, right? So everybody's apparently, I mean, I have to say I only found this out after I got the ID for Tunga, but apparently it's a big thing. How can we untap this potential? Now, how can we tap this potential, this untapped potential that there is on the African continent? I think that all those initiatives are helpful, even Andela as well. So you see, if you have 30,000 applications to Andela and they only hire 75 or 150, then that tells me that there's below that segment a huge opportunity, right? As for Code Academy, I can say my experiences is that there are already a lot of good people who can write good code in Africa. That's absolutely not the bottleneck from our perspective. From our perspective, the bottleneck is what we call soft skills, right? So if I have somebody from, let's say, Kampala, who has never been outside of Uganda, who has never worked for Western clients, how is this person going to learn to make a client happy who is from a different culture, who has very specific demands in terms of how they want to run project, how they want to run processes, right? So the challenge is much more in, let's say, bridging cultures, into bridging communication differences, and approaches to project management.
Right. Now, I mean, going back to, your past experience and some of the things you shared about that, working in Russia and other places in the world, what would you say you've had to leverage the most in terms of your training, perhaps your exposure and experience, having worked in different parts of the world?
Yeah.
What have you had to leverage, or what has been the most useful thing you've leveraged in growing Tunga?
Well,
Is it perhaps your network?
I think that, I love this question because I've thought about it myself. And when I went to Russia, I was a young guy, right? It was my first job, so I basically I didn't know anything. And at one point, I was helping Dutch companies doing mergers or acquisitions in Russia, and then I had to receive the big guys, right? High people, important people. And it was only seeing them in action in negotiations that I realized that I had built up a valuable skill. And that was to be able to understand two different, really distinct cultures. Because a lot of people, maybe especially from the West, but I don't know, they are maybe even arrogant, if you will. But certainly they do not always understand what's happening at the other side of the table, right? So having learned this early on in my career, this is also how I approach this type of process that we're doing now with Tunga. So for me, it's very much about creating common ground, also using technology and using the platform to help bridge the culture and the differences in how they prefer to communicate, as opposed to taking a best practice from, let's say, the West and trying to impose it on people who have a totally different background, or the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's being able to understand and value even cultural differences and how to bridge them. That would be the quality that I apply is most valuable to me in this project.
And what advice would you give to coders listening to this interview around perhaps managing their expectations? Speak to a coder who aspires to having an international career, who sees themselves as a citizen of the world,
Yeah.
who looks forward to using platforms like Tunga and others to grow their career and do work for clients anywhere in the world. What would you say is the most important piece of advice you could give to someone like that, sitting somewhere like, say, you mentioned Kampala, Uganda,
Yeah.
or Kigali in Rwanda, or even Johannesburg, South Africa? What would you say to someone who perhaps hasn't had the experience you've had in traveling the world and experiencing all these cultures? What would you say is most important for them to know?
I would say hook up with other people in your own environment who have this experience, right? So organize meetups or visit meetups where you can meet those type of people, because these people, they are the ones who can understand you and the client. And this is, in the end, this is about being able to understand the client. And for that, you need to suck up all the experience that you can get. And the most low threshold is to find people in your own environment who have that experience, right?
Right.
So for me, this is all about, let's say, learning. Now we come back to my hospitality background. So professionally, I never did anything with it. But if you learn something on a hotel school, it is to be totally focused on the needs of your customer.
Right.
And in the end, it doesn't mean that you, let's say, have to, how do you say it? You have to always to keep your own interests in mind and keep your self-respect, of course, in place, right?
So don't be a doormat.
Don't be a doormat, right? But if you understand the needs of the customer, then you can position yourself optimally to get out of a relationship in a way that's most beneficial to you, right? So
right, absolutely. Well, listen, how can people get in touch with you? You mentioned that often people prefer to drop an email or give you a shout. How's the best way for people interested in plugging into Tunga and what you guys are doing to get a hold of you?
Okay, so well, first off, check the website. It's tunga.io, so tunga.io. There you have contact form and everything. You can send me an email, which is ernesto@tunga.io, ernesto@tunga.io. And you can ask me any question you like, and we'll get back to you very quickly. So and that's a way to start.
Absolutely, and I know you have a very busy speaking schedule. You certainly believe in the advice you just shared in keeping not tabs. I wouldn't say tabs on the various ecosystems you interact with, but certainly lines of interaction quite open. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me, Ernesto. Really appreciate your time.
It was really a pleasure, and I hope to stay in touch, Andile.